across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell here between now and 9 o'clock. So much to discuss, including that Quds demonstration on Sunday. Why on earth is the organisation behind it that hates this country, that is for the regime in Iran? Why have they got charitable status in this country? We'll talk about what they're saying, about what their hatred is for this country, and why this demonstration shouldn't be allowed to go ahead, in my opinion. Now, it's not a march, it's a demonstration, but there's so many people with so much hatred, but maybe you think actually it's free speech and maybe it should be allowed to go ahead. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. I put out a tweet earlier today. I was not expecting such a reaction about Hannah Spencer, the new MP, the Green MP, about what she was wearing. I said I don't really care about what she's wearing. Lots of people do and think, as Kevin said, it's like a rainbow gone wrong in his view. Certainly I care about what she says, about talking about how important trans people are, how important they get blamed for everything in her view. I don't think that's true. Also, she said she wanted to stand up for Muslims in her constituency. Well, what about all the other groups as well? What about Christians? What about Jews? What about Sikhs? What about Hindus? Well, apparently only Muslims are the group that she mentioned anyway, the only religious group that she mentioned in her maiden speech in Parliament this week. On the debate desk, Lucy Beresford, the psychotherapist and broadcaster, and Mike Indian, the political commentator. We'll talk about why so many Labour councillors are jumping ship to the Greens and the worries I have about that. A bit more about Hannah Spencer as well. And the manosphere, why so many men want women to obey them. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. We'll also talk about why the NHS has to pay £70 to replace a battery. Yes, really. And the latest on the Iran war, of course, from a former fighter pilot and now military analyst who'll talk to us a little bit later on. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, however you want to get in touch this Friday evening, you're very, very welcome to do so. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, less than a minute please. We'll play those out before 9 o'clock. Tell us what you think. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message on the main number. You can give me a ring on the main number. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, as I say, 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss here on Talk. Well, before we get into our main discussion with Andrew Fox, the Senior Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, about this hate march, I just want to bring you up to date on two of the things we're going to talk about tonight. The less serious one first, I think. So Hannah Spencer, I mean, it is serious, certainly, but she mentioned trans people and indeed Muslims in her speech, but not any other religious group or indeed minority. This is what she said in Parliament, but if you're watching, you will see what she's wearing, which a lot of people seem to think is inappropriate for Parliament. I wonder what you think of that. Let's have a look at what she said in her maiden speech.
My trans siblings who get blamed for everything. To the Muslims everywhere who are constantly and often violently scapegoated. I want to put Gorton and Denton on the map by championing the positives about our community. The spirit, the warmth, the grit, and the way that we help each other out every single day. Whether that's our neighbours where we live or our siblings in places like Afghanistan, Gaza, Sudan, Iran, wherever we are, we deserve to live freely as the human beings that we all are.
So I don't really care that she's wearing a pink shirt and a sort of blue, baby blue waistcoat. She's worn very bright colours, certainly green trousers, I think, as well. Lots of people in touch on my Twitter today saying, well, actually, no, she's fallen below the standards that MPs have. She's treating it like a joke. She looks like a CBeebies presenter. Lots of different messages on that. But what I'm more concerned about myself, and maybe I'm wrong to be more concerned about this, but I think I'm right, is actually the Green Party itself. The fact that she seems to care more for her Muslim constituents than other constituents. The fact that she wants to stand up and says that trans people are blamed for everything. I don't think that's true at all. Also, the Green Party itself is being absolutely infiltrated by Islamists, and that's something that I want to talk about more in just a second with Andrew Fox. In the meantime, let's have a look at what Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War in America, has been saying today about the Iran war, which is, of course, continuing and sees no sign of abating. So many problems there, particularly the problems in the Strait of Hormuz, and, of course, the civilian death toll as well. This is what Pete Hegseth has been saying.
We know the new so-called not-so-supreme leader is wounded and likely disfigured. He put out a statement yesterday, a weak one, actually, but there was no voice and there was no video. It was a written statement. He called for unity. Apparently killing tens of thousands of protesters is his kind of unity. Iran has plenty of cameras and plenty of voice recorders. Why a written statement? I think you know why. His father, dead. He's scared, he's injured, he's on the run, and he lacks legitimacy. It's a mess for them. Who's in charge? Iran may not even know.
Pete Hegseth there speaking earlier. Becca's been in touch and said people need to wake up. We're going to be the next Iran or Lebanon under the evil regime of Labour, as she calls them, or the Green Party. Let's speak to Andrew Fox, Senior Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Andrew, thanks for joining us this evening. There's so much to talk about, of course, but maybe you could just react to what Pete Hegseth was saying there. Do we actually know who's in control in Iran?
We can make an informed guess. It's almost certainly the IRGC, which is the Revolutionary Guard Corps. They were designed to protect the revolution, as their name suggests. And the fact that this young Khamenei was elected shows that they had enough votes to get a hardliner through, which suggests to us that the IRGC has probably the lion's share of the sway right now. They're operating on what we call a mosaic command structure, which means that they have devolved command to around 32 different headquarters across Iran. Each of those has their own orders and missions, and they're enabled to operate independently of control from Tehran, which is how they're managing to maintain, a very small level of missile and drone firing, and they're managing to keep themselves in the fight. And so the regime effectively is designed to withstand this kind of hit at the very top.
Andrew, it's interesting, as a former military officer yourself, you'll know a lot about this. When it comes to the Straits of Hormuz, we've heard so much about that in recent days, and it might be something that's kind of new to a lot of people as well. It's incredibly important that the oil and other goods move through the Straits of Hormuz, but it's basically paralysed at the moment. There are so many conflicting reports about whether there are mines there. Just tell us a bit about its significance and what could happen if it's not, if there isn't going to be free movement there in the next, next little while, or perhaps for a much longer period. We know France as well and a couple of other countries are trying to sign treaties or opening talks anyway with Iran to try to get their oil moved. I just wonder if you see any seeds of hope here?
Well, the Strait of Hormuz, for those who don't know, is the narrow choke point that separates the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf. It's where the oil that comes out of places like Iraq flows through. And it accounts for about 20% of the world's oil supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz. It's very narrow, and therefore it's easy to block with mines or with various kinds of fire from drones or whatever it might be. Look, you don't have to be an economist to work out that if you live in a petrochemical world and 20% of those petrochemicals get cut off, then that's going to make prices for oil rise around the world. And when oil prices go up, the price for everything else goes up as well. And that's why this is of such strategic importance. At the moment, there is some shipping sailing through there. It's mainly been Chinese. The Iranians have given permission for the Chinese to go through because they're the ones buying Iranian oil to keep the Iranian regime in the fight. So it can be that people can get through, which is why I think European countries who deny it, by the way, may well be negotiating directly with the Iranians in order to try and get oil out, because they're trying to keep a control on their own cost of living crises across Europe. So that's the background to it. How do you open it up if the Iranians do shut it down? That's the million-dollar question. At the moment, it looks like they're going to have to start escorting ships through those straits, which means they're going to have to commit significant amounts of military hardware to doing that. It means that the Iranians are probably going to keep trying to do what they do. They've set fire to about 7 ships so far, I believe. They've struck them with missiles. And yeah, it's going to be a very tricky task because the Americans have 2 carrier groups in the region, which sounds like a lot of ships. But given that those carrier groups are committed to the offensive operations, they're going to need to find something else to do the escort duty for the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah. So we'll have to wait and see how that develops over the next coming days and weeks. Let's
talk about a separate but related event that's happening on Sunday. We know, there's some really shocking information about this, the people who are organising the Al-Quds demonstration on Sunday. Raza Kazim, who's a trustee of the preposterously named Islamic Human Rights Commission's charitable funding arm, was filmed at a protest about the strikes on Iran over last weekend. He yelled death to the IDF, which the Prime Minister says is hate speech, although we know that Pascal Robinson Foster of Bob Villan was not prosecuted for it, shamefully, and that Iran's late leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, makes us proud. Why on earth this is a charitable organisation is really, really in question, and they're organising this hate, not march, because it's been banned as a march, but a static protest on Sunday. How dangerous is it, do you think? We're expecting thousands of people, 12,000 people are expected to attend.
Let's be really clear on where Al-Quds Day comes from. Al-Quds is the Arabic name for Jerusalem, and it was created in 1979 by the previous Ayatollah Khamenei, and it was designed for Shia Muslims to show their solidarity with the Palestinian cause and against the state of Israel and Zionism more generally. So that's the background to this. It's very much Iranian in origin. So therefore, it's incredibly inappropriate to have a day in London that's backed by the regime in Tehran, which murders people in their tens of thousands, blinds women for not wearing their headscarves, and all the other atrocities that we know they've committed. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, the Human Rights Act says that you have a right to protest if you're in the UK. It's enshrined in law. And the police can only ban these things if it reaches a threshold of likely disorder that the police won't be able to manage. So it shows you how concerned they are about this and what the risk is that it actually reached that threshold for banning, which is incredibly hard to do. The very last one that was banned was a Tommy Robinson march back in 2012 with the EDL, where they were going to march through a heavily I think minority area, and the police didn't feel that they could keep control of that situation, and that's where we're at now with this Al-Quds march. So static demonstration, I mean, it's within their rights to do so if the police haven't been able to get that banned either, but it is incredibly inappropriate given everything that Iran has done this year at least.
Sir Mark Rowley, who is the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, says our assessment was focused solely on the operational realities, the mix of groups, their locations, their mutual antagonism, and the likelihood that together at this moment they would create a highly volatile and confrontational situation on London streets. I mean, looking at some of the people behind this as well, Masood Shajari, who is a co-founder and chairman of the Islamic Human Rights Commission, claims to have met Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He says, I was asked to explain his research, he puts it, into Islamophobia to Ayatollah Khamenei, and in the small gathering I explained the whole findings to him, it's reported. He says, we did a report about Islamophobia, how the environment is created by politicians, by the media, and in that environment people become so bad that even sometimes get shocked that I've become so racist. Very, very interesting. That was in quotes talking about the people themselves. These people behind this, Raza Kazim and Masood Shajari, are not nice people. They don't love our country by everything I'm reading and learning about them, yet they're behind this. I mean, how do you feel about freedom of assembly? I think that free speech is really, really important, and actually the real test of it, I suppose, is when you have people who you fundamentally disagree with. But if someone's saying death to the IDF and that Iran's late leader makes us proud, that to me is, I mean, it's hate speech and it's incitement.
And look, it also shows the incredible weakness of our government when it comes to matters Iranian. We've failed to prescribe the IRGC, as so many countries around Europe, and indeed the EU itself have. We have failed to sanction individuals who are connected to the regime. The Ayatollah has an office headquarters in London that we have not somehow gotten rid of. We haven't expelled the Iranian ambassador, even after we've had arrests this week linked to the regime.
Last night, Andrea, I was doing this. Last night, I was doing the story about the civil servants, the Foreign Office diplomats who were going to an Iranian embassy event celebrating the revolution, and singing the national anthem in support of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, even as human rights groups talked about the thousands, tens of thousands of people that the regime were killing. I don't know why this country is so weak on Iran.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And I think it goes back to days when the Foreign Office had real reach and real influence in the Middle East, and they're unable to kind of get past the idea that perhaps some people in the Middle East aren't worth influencing, and what we should in fact be doing is sanctioning them is banning them and cracking down on their presence in our country, because the bottom line is they hate us and want us destroyed. And that charities are able to operate under these auspices, that even static demonstrations are allowed to take place, really does go to the heart of quite a lot of the problems I think we do have in this country when it comes to these extremists that we've seen on our streets every day for 2 years, droning on about imaginary genocides in Gaza. You know, this is the world we've created, and I think we do need to show a bit more spine. I'm hoping that banning this march on the weekend is the first step in actually getting a grip of this problem.
Andrew, thank you. That's Andrew Fox there, who's a senior fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, former officer in the Army as well. Thank you for joining us this evening. Lots of people getting in touch on all sorts of issues, not least Hannah Spencer, but actually it's interesting that Elisa in Chelmsford has said, "Good evening, Peter. Good evening, Elisa. I acknowledge that dress code might not be the most pressing issue, but I believe many women in Parliament dress in a way that undermines their authority and the seriousness of their roles. The Code of Conduct for MPs emphasises maintaining high standards of behaviour and respect for the institution, which includes presenting oneself professionally. Perhaps I'm a prude, but it's my opinion that we can disagree without being disagreeable. Like it." Let's hear what Rob has said in a voice note.
Hello, Peter. It's Rob here in Stourbridge, mate. Pete, just quickly, on that Green MP in Parliament, she looks like Julia said, I think, on one of the shows. She looks like Mario and Luigi's lost sister. Right. Whoa. But anyway, I'm worried about what she said, and I want to know what siblings she's got in Afghanistan, Syria, Sudan, and Iran, because those are the countries she mentioned, and she said the siblings. So what siblings has she got? Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rob. And it's interesting, I mean, there are quite a few messages from men and women about this. Nat says her hairstyle doesn't match her age, as my mother would say, but you're right, what's coming out of her mouth is far uglier, talking about what the Green Party stances are. And that, to me, is the most important thing. But listen, I'm happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about. This is my show, but it's your show too. Sasha in Norfolk says, Hannah Spencer's dress sense truly reflects the political sense of the party she represents. I think she is dressed appropriately. I think she's dressed appropriately. She looks like an explosion in a mattress factory. Not very nice. Stephen says this woman is not fit to be an MP. I wonder what the Muslims she wants to support think of her views on LGBTQ issues, says Stephen in Manchester. Another person says, Robin Burney says, why would Starmer employ Mandelson to save embarrassment of the Labour Party, maybe even the Royals, to use whatever influence he can to get these Epstein files redacted? And Chris says Miliband is shutting all our oil and gas supplies down, as he says we don't need it, so these blockades won't affect us. As he says, we're doing great with windmills and solar. Shows the man is a total lunatic, destroying our country with his stupidity. We need oil and gas for the next 100 years or more. And Dawn says, so many people on Talk do Starmer impressions. I don't suppose you will attempt Starmer impressions, but it'll be interesting to hear you try. The only words I can say that Keir Starmer says on the Metropolitan Police. Anyway, that's just how he says. He says in a quite strange way. Michael in Birmingham has given me a ring about these protests and about these organisations behind it, or one of them in particular, having charitable status. Michael, thanks for the call. You've given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say?
Yeah, good evening, Peter. This just has been like kicking a bit of an open door for me. I've been saying this for a while. This country's got a bit of a Minnesota feel about it, with some of these charitable organisations, some of these groups, who's funding them, what they're really for, who their memberships are. You know, and even the Green MP there, you know, she talked about all sorts of things. She didn't talk about anything green that I heard there. Apart from maybe not on that clip, not on that clip certainly, but she has talked about wanting to make hope normal again. Said she had, and she talked about aspiration. She talked about a few green issues certainly, but in that particular clip that she was talking about there, she said her constituency had suffered decades of neglect and broken promises. It's interesting actually when you talk about not necessarily Hannah Spencer, but certainly the Green Party more generally. I do worry that they have been hijacked by Islamists and the kind of people who may well be at that march on Sunday. Yeah, and also the background of some of the people at that march on Sunday. I think you're going to see basically a representation of what you see at the Palestine marches, where a lot of the people might not have any connection to Iran at all. They probably don't even in their heart of hearts care about it. They just want to demonstrate about something. There's an agenda at work, a woke, multicultural, anti-right, something agenda that's bubbling under with a lot
Michael,
of...
all of this makes sense, and I think I suppose we should probably call it a gathering on Sunday rather than a march, because the march bit has been bad. But I mean, I do wonder about the people who will be there, because you'll have some who will support Islamism, and you'll have others who simply don't like Israel, and then you'll have others who say they care about human rights and women's rights, and you're thinking, hold on, you're going to be in support of a regime which does everything it can to suppress its own people. It's astonishing to me that so many people who have been, tens of thousands of people who've been out on these pro-Palestinian marches are nowhere to be seen. Where are the women's charities talking about the women in Iran? Where are the human rights charities talking about what's happening in Iran? They're nowhere. Where's Gary Lineker talking about the football players, the female football players who defected? He said absolutely nothing about that. Where are the lionesses on this? There's so much hypocrisy, Michael.
Absolutely, and again, another thing. Even if you talk about religion, I won't go into what my religion is, but you hear so many people say, I don't believe in religion. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's pathetic. Then you say, you think Islam's, pathetic then because that's a religion. Yeah. Well, no, not really. No, You see what I mean? And I think there's a lot of that behind it.
I know exactly what you mean. Michael, you speak a lot of common sense, and I really appreciate your call, as always. Anytime you like, you can ring me and I'll talk to you, because you're a great man and you speak a lot of common sense. So thank you. That's Michael in Birmingham there. Tony in Milan says, Peter, we'd be better off with Frank Spencer than Hannah Spencer. Maybe she'll wear a beret. She could accessorise. Gaz says, evening, Peter. How could Starmer stand there and apologise, saying Mandelson lied to him when he never even gave him the job or vetted him, apparently. Brian says, well, I'll come to that in a second. Another person says, deport all who openly display hatred for our country. They're a danger and they need to go. Can you imagine if we did this in their countries? Get them out. Brian says, what brightens my day, Peter, is that I know the Downing Street cat Larry will still be there when Starmer takes the walk of shame when he has finally been ousted. Larry's 19 now. If only someone would write a book about him. Lots to talk about on the debate desk in just a moment. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Bit of breaking news now on Talk, and that is that Sir Laurie Magnus, who is the independent advisor on ministerial standards, he was asked by Alex Burghardt, who's a senior member of Kemi Badenoch's team. You might remember last night at 8 o'clock that news broke. The letter went to Sir Laurie Magnus asking the independent advisor on ministerial standards to launch a probe into Keir Starmer's actions around Peter Mandelson. That's been denied, and Sir Laurie says, I do not, in the light of the foregoing, see the grounds for investigation request in relation to the statements made by the Prime Minister. Given the public interest in this matter concerning the Prime Minister, I am publishing this letter. I mean, there's obviously a lot there, but the two statements made by the Prime Minister, if I knew then what I know now, he would never have been anywhere near government, and a few other aspects to this. So really what he's saying is it's not in his remit, and there won't be an inquiry by him into this. That's just broken in the last few minutes. We're on the debate desk with Mike Indian, the political commentator, and Lucy Beresford, the psychotherapist and broadcaster. Lovely to see you both. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Can I just get your reaction to this breaking news first, Mike, from you?
I mean, I think it would look a lot like the Prime Minister's advisor marking his own homework effectively. If he had, this is the trouble with the accountability at top of government, and there probably will be further questions as more of the Mandelson files are released, particularly the WhatsApps, which are likely to contain some of the more salacious details around how this appointment was made. But I think at the moment it's too early to say whether or not an inquiry was needed.
It's interesting with Sir Laurie Magnus as well, because he is sort of deputised by the Prime Minister to say, you know, someone's perhaps done something wrong, go and look into that and then see where things are. It's not usually meant to be on the Prime Minister himself.
No, and I think if, you know, we saw this very clearly with Boris Johnson and Partygate, if these statements are shown to be true, they catch up with the Prime Minister eventually. You know, there's going to be so much scrutiny on what Keir says and does around this at the moment. He can't possibly think this is anything but a temporary reprieve from the scrutiny he's facing.
Lucy?
Yeah, I did wonder actually whether the Tories had gone too early, that actually it probably was going to always end up this way at this stage. But the more that comes to light, and today we've heard that Keir Starmer didn't actually even speak to Peter Mandelson before he made the appointment. So there's going to be so much more ammunition, one might say. But it's not quite a cover-up, but because he hasn't gone for because Laurie Magnus hasn't gone for the investigation, it does give the impression of like a holding pattern with more revelations to come.
Yeah, and we know a lot more of those documents will be coming out as well when the Metropolitan Police are happy with all of that. I want to talk actually about the new Green MP, Hannah Spencer. She has made her maiden speech in Parliament. She said she wanted to make hope normal again. She used a debate about International Women's Day to say she found that some children had dressed up for events marking the day at their schools as Hannah the Plumber, wearing overalls and copying her distinctive hairstyle. Interestingly, I'm actually just going to read out the tweet I put out earlier on, because lots of people disagree with me on this, and maybe Mike and Lucy are people who disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine, because in this programme we disagree without being disagreeable. But on Hannah Spencer and what she's wearing, lots of people have said that. In fact, one person did a grok thing to make her wear more sort of conservative small c clothing. She's got sort of green trousers, a bright pink shirt, and a kind of blue waistcoat with sort of frilly edges. I had written, couldn't care less what Hannah Spencer looks like or wears. There are proper actual things to criticise her for: her support for Islamists, including in her own party, policy to legalise all drugs, including date-rape drugs, and anti-Semitism in the Greens. Criticise her for that. So you can hear and see, if you're watching on the screen, although I've described what her clothes are, let's play a clip of Hannah Spencer speaking in her maiden speech.
My trans siblings who get blamed for everything. To the Muslims everywhere who are constantly and often violently scapegoated. I want to put Gorton and Denton on the map by championing the positives about our community. The spirit, the warmth, the grit, and the way that we help each other out every single day. Whether that's our neighbours where we live or our siblings in places like Afghanistan, Gaza, Sudan, Iran, wherever we are, we deserve to live freely as the human beings that we all are.
Well, what do Lucy and Mike think about that? Let's find out in just a minute. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Angela, who says, loving your evening shows and political insight alongside your interesting guests. This new Iranian leader is clinging to life. It must be the army controlling the fight back. I'm disappointed Iran is still a tyrannical country. My heart goes out to the people who want it to change, says Angela. One of the reactions to my tweet says, oh, F off, trying to be a new man, you effing wimp. She looks a mess and everyone is allowed to say so. Grow a pair, says Art Manic. So thank you to him. Also, this person says, has anyone told Hannah Spencer that a 2016 survey by Channel 4 revealed 80% of British Muslims believe homosexuality should be banned? I don't know if that's true. Certainly that is what this person has said anyway. There are certainly a large number of Muslims who do not like homosexuality. That is certainly part of many people's religious faith. It's not all Muslims, but it is many of them. Angela says, Muslim women in the 21st century UK being suppressed by men. Women follow their family in case they act against their religion. Where are people like Jess Phillips supporting these women? As for Hannah Spencer, she is a fraud in my opinion, only fulfilling personal ambition. Well, what do Lucy and Mike think of what Hannah Spencer is both saying and how she's communicating it and her clothes? Let's speak to the psychotherapist on the debate desk.
On the body language.
On the body language, on what she's projecting. Lucy, off you go.
There's nothing wrong with pink, is all I would say.
Which you're wearing.
Which I am channeling my inner Hannah Spencer. I mean, the really interesting thing about her is that it's very her. And authenticity is an amazing currency at the moment, particularly within politics. And everybody knows that, you know, when you can fake that, you're onto a winner. So to that extent, she's being very true to herself. And that's what, in certain sections of popular culture, is a really important thing. We see it on reality TV shows where people get voted in and out, and politics has really become a form of reality TV in that sense.
Do you think that's why people are so impatient? Because we're voting for these things all the time. They're saying, right, we need a new Prime Minister. We've had one for 2 years.
Over the last 15 years, we have gotten used to people saying, OK, I'm going to vote for this housemate, and now that housemate's been evicted, so now I've got to turn my attention to these other people. And the turnover of people that you form an attachment with is incredibly rapid. And we're not really used to that staying power of being able to say, actually, I'm going to stay with it for the long haul. Actually, that we've got used to people saying, you know, one strike and you're out. There's no loyalty. That kind of voter promiscuity has been moved from reality TV into the world of politics. And as Donald Trump will demonstrate, politics is now just about entertainment.
Very interesting. In earth tones and sporting a jaunty piece of headwear is Mike Indian. What do you make of what Hannah Spencer's
I mean, as someone who's often, you know, vilified by the listeners for my choice of headwear on the show, I think she's adding a splash of colour to a very otherwise quite dreary and decaying institution sometimes in the House of Commons. And looked at the other outfits she sported, she has a clear sense of her own style and individualism, and it's something that will serve her well in an age when, you know, we're seeing the MPs that have the most cut through are the ones that have their strongest unique identity. And indeed, it's quite telling that none of the other Green MPs really enjoy that kind of name recognition that she has. And Peter, you know, we must have sat through between there's thousands of maiden speeches in that regard, and most of the time they're wholly unremarkable here. Very occasionally, an MP will say something, either it gets captured in retrospect, like Joe Cox.
They're actually meant to be uncontroversial. The point of a maiden speech is that it's meant to be uncontroversial.
I did like in her speech, particularly the level of detail she espoused about her constituency. I've never been to Gorton and Denton, but I felt like I could feel it, the words leaping off the page in Hansard describing it as well. But to focus solely on what she's dressed like when the House of Commons, until the 1990s, you could only ask a point of order while wearing a top hat. I think we should remember.
Is that what you're going for?
I mean, I think so.
Well, he's much more down with the kids.
I'm channeling the Keir Hardy thing of not refusing to wear a suit when you arrive.
Peaky Blinders, yeah. Well, actually, Mike has his whippet outside.
And
what were you going to say?
Coal in the bath as well. So, yeah. You're actually not Northern, are you?
No, I'm not. Well, my father's from the North East, but I don't sound like involved.
No, it doesn't
sound like I've spent most of my life in southern England.
Didn't think so. Well, let's talk a little bit about all these Labour councillors jumping ship to the Greens amid fears of a wipeout in May at the local elections and also the elections to the Scottish Parliament and Welsh Assembly. The defections are gathering pace, apparently, ahead of the local elections, claims Zach Polansky's party, which of course includes Hannah Spencer. He says he was receiving an average of 2 or 3 inquiries a week from local Labour politicians looking to defect, and 50 have already defected to the Greens within the last 6 months. Is this in any way principled, or is it just about saving their skin, Lucy?
Yes, unfortunately, this kind of story will only reinforce a voter's suspicion that politicians are only in it for themselves, and they look at the polling and they look at the sort of membership surge behind the Greens, and they think, oh goodness me, yes, the Labour councillors probably think they need to go, and at that point the voters think, well, where is your integrity, where is your commitment to your own party and their manifesto? And also what I would say is, even though the Greens are very left-wing, and quite a lot of these Labour councillors themselves would probably classify themselves as left-wing, they only really have to look at the Green manifesto from 2024 to see quite how bonkers and extreme it is. So if it is being driven by the polls or by the membership surge, that is really damaging.
That's a really good point, actually, because there's so many people who think the Green Party are just, tree-hugging eco-loons.
Oh my God, they're economically violent. I mean, almost inflicting criminal damage on the economy. They are specifically anti-growth. There was one paragraph on growth in their entire 2024 manifesto. They basically want to destroy capitalism, and they just want to spend loads of money and destroy capitalism.
They say nothing of their views in the Middle East, on so many Islamists who are in their party.
Decriminalising drugs.
Decriminalising all drugs. Including
that,
date rape drugs. Muthan Ali, who is the deputy leader, was at a pro-Iranian protest. Absolutely outrageous. Mike, what do you think about these Labour councillors jumping ship?
It looks like a chicken run. It is a chicken run for them to be doing this. The part of London where I am, the Greens are, I think, expected to do very well in Waltham Forest. I would be surprised if Zach Polansky doesn't try and look for a North East London seat. The kind of politics, though, that they've espoused, and I've known personally a Labour councillor that's now moved to the Greens, it's an interesting example of how we're seeing a populist left resurgence that we thought would emerge from your party and is now actually instead being capitalised on by the Greens. This is stuff that, these were the people running the Labour Party
is your party, is Jeremy Corbyn's party anywhere? Is it anywhere? Because if they'd actually capitalised on that hard left vote, they could have got maybe 10%, but they just don't seem to be organised.
Well, it's a classic example of factionalism, and we mustn't forget that there are factions within the Green Party, and of course the leadership contest that brought Zach Polansky to prominence, it was actually he defeated a co-leadership bid from 2 of his own MPs. Hannah Spence is quite unique in the fact that she is one of a very solid supporter of Zach Polansky in the Commons, and of course that's going to set up an interesting dynamic because he's one of the few party leaders that enjoys the prominence that's actually outside of Westminster.
Yes,
he's in that space that Farage was in for many years. He is elected, but he's a member of the London Assembly, which affords him a platform. But in a sense, he's become a national political figure, largely through his own media persona and his own efforts.
And also because because the narrative around immigration has moved on a little bit. When that was an incredibly prominent issue, Nigel Farage was going to be riding the wave of that. But it's actually really slipped down the agenda, while things like cost of living crisis, one might argue, is
people still care about it, but you're right, it's not as big a political issue.
Exactly, and actually there have been some movements that Labour have implemented that have actually brought quite a lot of that immigration down. So it's not going to be the same defining topic that maybe the right could have really expected to benefit from. Actually, what people are going to be thinking about are things around fairness and whether, again, the Greens want to nationalise pretty much everything, all of the electricity companies, the water industry.
Which are very expensive activities if you're buying the shares off the company's back.
Oh, totally.
It's not like with the railways where you're just taking the contracts back in at no extra cost.
And ironically, you'd make a lot of people very rich in doing so, the shareholders, the board members and all the rest of it.
And they think they can get away with everything just by taxing more rich people, whereas actually quite a lot of those rich people will just leave. So having a higher rate of tax very rarely works because you can't actually even get the revenue that you are projected to get. So that idea of high borrowing, supply side kind of stagnation because they don't want to build any more new roads and they don't want to build any more new airports or extend any of the airports. You're just going to have stagflation. You're going to actually completely cripple the economy. And any Labour councillor that is remotely flirting with the idea of this really needs to take a hard look at what they actually want for their voters, because the Green manifesto will actually cripple a lot of voters economically.
I mean, we've seen the scrutiny that's been applied to reform councils since last year's local election sweep as well. The reports of the Greens running councils like Brighton are not great. And they look, in the time I've worked in politics, the Greens have they've gone from winning Brighton Pavilion to expanding their reach. They're now winning in seats, albeit in by-elections, where traditionally they haven't, it's like Bristol, Brighton that they've held. What I find incredibly interesting is the lack of scrutiny the media have applied to how Green councils are being run as well. And I think ahead of the local elections...
I think they've done that with Reform UK councils as well. There's a real lack of scrutiny.
We need to see due diligence applied to how the local government that has been squeezed, yes, over the last 15 years or so, how those councillors would run those authorities differently, or would they still end up, as many reform councils have, having to make the difficult decisions to raise council tax because once they're confronted with the sheer deficits on their books to keep things like libraries open, social care going, they realise there's no other option available to them.
All of that makes absolute sense, Mike, and actually what everybody, reform councillor will tell you, and probably every councillor will tell you, is that the movement, the things you can actually do as a councillor, even when you're head of a council, even when you are in control of a council, about 75% of what councils do is either special educational needs, transport or provision in some way, or social care provision. And people have a legal entitlement to that, and you cannot deny them that.
No.
Therefore, you only have about 25%. And actually, I spoke to one member of Reform UK councillor a few weeks ago. He said, look, we didn't want to, but we've put up council tax by 2.99%. 2% is for those two things. The 2% rise is for social care and special educational needs, transport and provision, and the 0.99 is everything else. And that's it.
And it's a failure of this government to have continued the previous government's policies of underfunding councils. I mean, the local government grant, like basically everything in British politics that where there's a problem, it goes back to either Tony Blair or George Osborne. In this case, it's George Osborne cutting the feed out of local councils, giving them a lot more power, yes, but also obligations, and taking their money away. Absolutely.
We're still dealing with that right now.
So they end up with essentially a rod for their own backs in this regard. But I do want to see more scrutiny applied to the Greens. I mean, they're going to make gains in Scotland and Wales as well, and probably, I think, in metropolitan areas across England. But the one thing that intrigued me about what Hannah Spencer said, she's contradicted herself in the same paragraph. She said at the start, I don't want to lump the white working class in together. Then she went on to speak in general terms about other particular groups, which we've referenced. I'm always very wary of politicians that don't apply that degree of nuance, because their constituents are individuals, they're huge varied areas. I don't want to see her let her constituents out in the same way someone like Zara Sultana has, when they end up kind of being taken over by these sort of great vaulting ambitions of speaking to the like Lenin for the back of a lorry to striking workers. They get captured by this sort of Arthur Scargill mentality in that regard, because that ultimately is not what people are sent to Parliament to do. They're sent to represent, and they're sent to make the lives of their constituents better. And even if they're opposition, there are still ways you can do that.
Yeah. Lucy, your take on what Mike's been saying?
Well, I think what's going to be really interesting is that the everything about this story is focused on the May elections, and that's fine. There won't be any scrutiny of either reform councils or Green councils before May, really, anything that's going to be meaningful. But the really important thing is that the next general election isn't for another 3 years. And if you think about
although Nigel Farage thinks next year.
Well, when you think about how high Reform were riding in the polls only 6 months ago, and everyone thought that was invincible, and that has appeared to tail off. The same movement will happen with Greens. The more they get
we've seen
that amount of scrutiny.
We've seen it already. You know, Reform UK at 23 percentage points in one poll, the Green Party at 21 percentage points, above what Labour and the Conservatives and the Lib Dems are as well. Really, really fascinating. Elaine's been in touch and says Lucy's wrong. Immigration is back as the #1 issue for voters. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think possibly media coverage would say that it may be the #1 issue for voters, but actually it's perhaps not the #1 issue that's being talked about. It is a lot on this station, of course. Joanna in Salisbury says, hi Cardi P. Hi Joanna. Hannah Spencer was 22 when she was listed in an article in The Guardian about best dressed people at the 2013 Glastonbury Festival. Unfortunately, there's a time and a place for everything. My goodness, wow, these are brutal. Sue says, if anyone takes what the Barbie doll says seriously, they're definitely green. Wow. And Yule in Ballymena says, some really unpleasant comments about Hannah Spencer. I'm surprised you gave them airtime, Peter. Yule, listen, I mean, I may not necessarily agree with all of these things, but the point of this station is that people talk and people say things. I mean, I don't agree with all of those things, and I mean, I made my point very clear. I wouldn't even be having this conversation were it not for all the people who got in touch with me on Twitter. Sarah says, I think the way she looks is a bit creepy. Her clothes and hair are very childish. It's like she's cosplaying a little blonde girl, and I find that quite creepy considering her target voters are. Not sure, Sarah, but I found her creepy since she first appeared on the scene. But listen, thank you for that, Sarah. And Stephen says, I heard something today that made a lot of sense. Islam is a political movement that happens to have a religion, which is then used to attack the freedom of religion in the UK, which in turn leads to where we are today with anti-Muslim law, which then protects political Islam to get on with their agenda of taking over, in Stephen's opinion there from Bristol. And another one, Samantha says, I'm starting to wonder if this is bordering on corruption. Has Laurie Magnus ever granted a single inquiry since Labour has been in power? Yes, he has, and there have been cabinet ministers who've gone as a result. I think Louise Haig and Angela Rayner. And Angela Rayner, of course. Thank you for that, Mike. Glyn in Catterick says, to myself, it now feels as if we're shifting from a fairly diverse society in the past to a certain ideology imposing their beliefs at a very rapid rate. Just my opinion, says Glyn in Catterick. And Emma says, perhaps Larry the cat should be in the back note. Yes, I can absolutely get behind that. If only someone would write a book about him. Paul has been in touch with a voice note. Let's hear what Paul has to say.
Good evening, Peter. We knew that it was going to be bad under a Labour government, but I don't think any of us realised just how bad it was going to be. They've proved to be incompetent in every area, and there's not a minister in place that actually understands their brief or is doing any good for the country. This, coupled with the fact that we've now got pro-Gaza and many very dangerous left-wing Labour MPs in Parliament, brings me to the conclusion that the Americans should actually think about removing our ability to have nuclear weapons. The Trident D5 missile is actually leased from the Americans. The warhead and the submarines are ours. I don't believe that this government is competent enough to be allowed to have such a deadly weapon in its arsenal. And coupled with the fact of the dangerous left-wing MPs that are now in power, I really believe that the Americans should withdraw our ability to have a nuclear weapon. Good evening, Paul from Hartlepool.
Paul, thank you. I mean, I think Trident is pointless, and I think it's a complete waste of money. Just a quick word on what he said there, Mike.
If America was to that extent unilaterally disarm the UK, it would just make those same dangerous MPs, in Paul's words, very, very happy, because most of them want to see nuclear weapons off British soil. They would agree with him.
Yeah.
So I don't agree with him, ironically.
You have to keep the threat. You have to be one of the powers that has a nuclear capability. You look at countries that don't have it and who feel very vulnerable, and you only look at North Korea and how smug they are. They know that no one will take them out because they have a nuclear weapon and they have a very reckless leader.
And look at what's happening with Iran. One more on Hannah Spencer before the break. Steve says, this woman is British, she can do as she pleases. Well, nearly as much as the people who have now been given papers to say that they are now British. Not much left for the politicians to give away before this country is really finished. On that happy note, we'll take a break. We'll talk more to Lucy and Mike in just a second, including about the manosphere. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, the top team behind the glass have found Hannah from The Guardian a number of years ago when she was 22. She's wearing a sort of wellies, very good idea, a Glastonbury, a jacket, which is a sort of yellowish number, mustardy number, and
such a fashionista.
blue. I mean, do you want to describe it, Lucy?
Style icon.
I think she looks like someone out of Bananarama.
Okay.
I mean, it looks like she's at Glastonbury.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she's just sort of very Glastonbury.
You have to say, hey, I create an image of a woman at Glastonbury and be like, yep, there you go, there she is.
Hannah said at home, she told The Guardian, at home a lot of girls dress the same way. It's boring. I pretty much dress like this all the time. People always get a shock when I turn up to their door to fix something. I work with lots of 40-something men, and they probably just think I'm a bit weird. So there we are. I work with a lot of
consistent.
Well, I work with a lot of 20-something men and women, and they probably think I'm a bit weird too. Right then, let's talk about.
Speaking of which,
yes, seamlessly, a third of Gen Z men think a wife should be subservient to her husband, according to a new study. There's a big documentary out from Louis Theroux as well. Lucy, you were keen to talk about this. Tell us your thoughts on it.
Well, in the beginning, I was very sceptical. I wasn't sure that it could even be valid, or if it was, maybe it was just in certain cultures. But this is a 23,000 person study across the world by Ipsos and the Global Institute for Women's Leadership. And they are recognising that anybody under the age of 30 is shifting their attitudes towards heterosexual relationships, and they're saying that Gen Z men in particular, they do want their women to obey them. And when I got married...
What do you mean by obey them?
Well, when I got married, that line in the church saying, there was a huge debate about whether you could actually take that word out, which actually I did. But nowadays, apparently, this is what men are looking for. And the reason why I'm sceptical about it is because there was some different research. Admittedly, it was from Ashley Madison, the discretion-led dating website, but they discovered that their largest sign-ups were men under the age of 30 who are clearly signing up to meet women who are very assertive, who are very in control of their own sexuality and getting their emotional needs met, as well as their financial, career, whatever. So that would suggest to me that Generation Z men want assertive women who know what they want in life. They're confident, they take control of their career, their finances and their sexual pleasure. This research suggests that no, actually they want that they don't want to change a nappy to 30-something men under 30s.
Let me just read out some of the statistics here. 31% of Gen Z men agree that a wife should always obey her husband. Weird. And 33% think that a husband should have the final say on an important decision. In addition, 24% of Gen Z men agree that a woman should not appear too independent or self-sufficient, compared with 12% of baby boomer men. 21% of Gen Z men believe that men who take part in caregiving for children are less masculine than those who do not, compared with just 8% of baby boomer men. Mike, what do you think of this?
I mean, as someone who's married, I feel I have to watch my words here very carefully. You know?
But it's kind of depressing, I find.
Well, it's a fascinating thing, and I think it's... I think that, based not just on Louis Theroux's documentary, but looking back to adolescence as well, the logistics of being a man of a generation younger than myself...
Although it was fiction, of course, adolescence.
Absolutely it was, but the navigations I think that young men face today are... It's finally started to get a sense of what I think this sort of influence has been pulling at young women for many years as well, and it is natural, I think, to want to have an identity and to assert masculinity, but I think you can do this in a way that is both empathetic and
Mike, I can't let you say that word at this time of the evening.
Sorry.
Mike, if they cut out for you for a minute or two, that just because Mike said a word. I think you mean Boulder-Dash.
Boulder-Dash, yes. Because, quite frankly, you know, the role of women as caregivers is so long been undervalued. I think it also speaks to the fact, the split speaks to the fact that a lot of younger men particularly don't know whom to look to now. Maybe they don't have this sort of, you know, I was lucky to grow up with positive male role models in my life, including my father and teachers and others around me as well.
But
I wonder if that exists.
Just a brief point, Lucy.
I do wonder whether it's actually it's the pendulum swinging the other way, having had 20 or 30 years, quite rightly, of the women's lib movement and needing to counteract things like Me Too and being able to say, you know, women deserve a seat at the table, for a lot of men, they look at that and think, well, when are we going to get the chance?
Yeah.
And most of us are thinking, well, you've had a millennia of patriarchy to get used to having everything your own way, and now a lot of men are pushing back.
Very, very interesting from both of you, Lucy Beresford, their broadcaster and psychotherapist, and Mike Indian, political commentator. Thank you so much for joining us on the debate desk this Friday evening. What do you think of what they have said? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about why 50 Labour councillors have defected to the Greens in the last 6 months with a top commentator coming next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock, and there's some breaking news from the Times newspaper reporting that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is considering options for an energy bailout. Rachel Reeves has apparently found the money for targeted support for lower income households, and it will be announced early next week. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens there. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about 50 Labour councillors defecting to the Greens within the past 6 months ahead of the May the 7th local elections. Why does it cost £70 to change a battery in the NHS? Yes, really. And we'll also talk about the Iran war and take your calls too. Whatever you'd like to say, however you'd like to say it, do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message on the main number. You can send me a WhatsApp voice message. We've had a few of those already. Let's have some more. Send those through, less than a minute please, on the main number. You can also ring me on the main number, which is of course 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss here on Talk. Stay with us. And I'm just getting this interview, this text through from the Times newspaper. It's just gone up on their website, and poorer households are apparently going to be offered targeted support to protect them from large rises in their energy bills under plans being drawn up in response to the economic crisis triggered by war in the Middle East. The Chancellor has told the Times newspaper the Treasury is drawing up different options to help those who are most vulnerable to soaring gas and energy costs when the current price cap comes to an end in June. She raised concerns about a universal bailout bailout for every household, similar to what was announced by Liz Truss in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but it could be unaffordable in the Chancellor's opinion, given Britain's high levels of debt. That cost £40 billion. The Chancellor next week is going to give a clear indication of her approach by announcing a package of support for households that rely on oil heating but cannot afford the soaring cost, which has risen by 80% in a week. I know certainly in my part of the world, in Northern Ireland, quite a number of households have oil-fired central heating. Thomas Godfrey is news reporter at The Sun and is going to talk more about the Green Party in just a second, which is why we called him in. But just on this breaking news, Thomas, is this a surprise to you? How do you think it will be received?
I don't think it's necessarily a surprise, but I think it will be received very well. We're hearing a lot of this money will be towards families, households in rural areas, those that use heating oil, as you said, which actually isn't in the Ofgem price cap. So those people would have been hit particularly hard as the price of Brent crude went up above $100 and looks like it could even go further if this block in the Strait of Hormuz was to continue. So I think it will be welcomed by poorer households. As you've mentioned, a universal bailout would cost substantially more than the targeted support the government now plans to roll out. They're going to use the Crisis and Resilience Fund to do this, we understand. It's one of the funds set up pretty much for situations like these, where something has to be done, where a sort of world event outside the control of the government has prompted some sort of response, and emergency spending measures have to be activated. And so I think a lot of readers, our readers at least, who we've been hearing all week about the prospect of bills going up by hundreds, if not thousands of pounds once the price cap ends, this will be very welcome to them tonight.
The Chancellor telling the Times, I have found the money to ensure people who are not protected by the energy price cap that we're giving greater support to those who really need it, she said, of the subsidies. And she said officials in the Treasury currently modelling different scenarios for household support depending on how long the conflict lasted and its long-term impacts on wholesale prices. She suggested that low-income households would be prioritised. We've got some time and we're working through in the Iran response group different approaches that we could take, including looking at more targeted options. We're working through different scenarios at the moment, and I don't want to suggest that we're going to do something that we know we're not able to deliver. So that is the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, talking about that, and of course there'll be more on that in the Times newspaper tomorrow. But I want to talk to Thomas about what we originally called you in for, Thomas Godfrey, news reporter at The Sun, which is all these Labour councillors defecting to the Green Party within the last 6 months. We've seen a real shift in politics, haven't we? We've seen the Green Party, one poll suggesting, a couple of polls actually, suggesting they could be the second biggest party in this country after Reform UK. Just tell us what's going on here.
It's sort of the ends at both sides of the Overton window bursting out of their seams. You know, on the right we've got Reform, who have surged in the polls and led for quite some time now in the opinion polls. And on the left, since Zach Polanski took charge of the Green Party, we've seen them slowly sapping away at Labour's support, especially at that left-wing base, which we saw in Gorton and Denton completely fell away from the Labour vote. And this is why now the Green Party talking in the last 48 hours or so about the fact that they're getting 2 or 3 Labour councillors a week coming to them and asking how they can defect. They think that Keir Starmer's drifted too far away from the sort of Labour ideology under Corbyn 10 years ago, and of course the Labour ideology, if you remember, just 6 years ago, that Keir Starmer was elected on.
Which he's drifted away from. He's drifted away from quite substantially,
The 10 pledges, which all of them eventually ended up U-turning on. 10 pledges, if you remember. All of those have gone out the window now. And it's for that reason that a lot of Labour councillors on the ground feel they've got no option but to go to the Green Party. One Labour MP on the left of the party told The Telegraph that it was a reflection of the fact our base is deserting us. So there are real and substantial fears now that Labour are being sort of eaten away at both sides, both by Reform and the Greens, and that's reflected, as you say, in some opinion polls where the Greens and Reform both above the government.
It's always the way, isn't it, where so many politicians say, well, you know, I didn't leave my party left me, and they may feel that the Green Party is more for them. Although the evolution of the Green Party is fascinating as well, because you see not just worrying about eco issues, but actually really wanting to kind of destroy the economy as we know it, I would argue. Also things like the fact that there's so many Islamists who are part of it. Their deputy leader, Muffin Ali, for example, joined a protest in favour of the Iranian regime. So it's a very different party to it has been previously, or maybe it's just a coalition, but a weird coalition, I would say, between the hard left politically and actually a sort of red-green aspect to it too.
It's a very weird party as a coalition, as voters. I mean, you look at some of the seats they picked up at the last election, I think they came from the Conservatives, incredibly. And that was off the back of, before Zach Polansky took charge, off the back of a lot of environmental promises, off the back of sort of removing oil and gas and looking at solar and wind and alternative sources of energy and huge amounts of government spending. And you're right, it has undergone this rapid transformation, really, in the last 6 months, to the point where it is now appealing to people who don't like Israel as a base of their political ideology. The basis of their political ideology is they don't like Israel, which is bizarre because Zach Polansky is a Jewish man. And Zach Polansky in the past, when he was a Lib Dem, had said, a vote for me in the London Assembly as a Lib Dem candidate is a vote for Israel, which is a weird sort of shape-shifting point for him to be at. So it is a very strange party as a coalition, but it is also quite appealing because the feeling is that they're on the rise. They've not hit their ceiling yet, they feel. The membership base is growing. There's a lot of people my age who I know who have decided to vote Green because they like Zach Polansky and they think he's honest and open. Now, whether you agree with that, I personally don't. You can decide. But it's just a very, very strange party generally, and I've not really been able to get my head around it for months now, because you're right, on one side there's a sort of conservative, socially conservative Muslim vote, which they picked up a lot in Gorton and Denton, and we saw them campaigning in Urdu. Other parties have campaigned in other language in the past, it's not a new thing, but they were doing it very hard, and quite a lot of it in Gorton and Denton. But on the other hand, in January, Zach Polansky held an event at Heaven nightclub.
A gay nightclub.
A gay nightclub. Those two worlds, I mean, there is a very thin Venn diagram for those two worlds. And so it's actually going to be really fascinating. Beyond May, where they will continue to edge away at the Labour vote, they'll pick up a load of council seats. Not the ones that have just defected, but also ones where they're actually going to come and beat Labour in traditionally left-wing areas. They're going to do very well, as will Reform. But actually, at the next election, it will be, in the same way it will be with Reform, it will be really fascinating to see if their coalition of voters stays together, because it does feel, especially for the Green Party, like their coalition of voters could actually be dictated by world events.
When you're talking to your friends who are thinking of voting for the Green Party, do they get it? Do they understand what you've just said? Are they familiar with the fact that there is a very strong Muslim vote, a very strong Islamist vote actually, for the Green Party, and that it's not just love, peace, harmony and LGBT rights?
It's different things to different people, isn't it? I think they've mastered this art of being able to go out, and you're in Gorton and Denton, which was just a fascinating examination of a by-election, wasn't it?
You spent time up there, didn't you?
I was up there very briefly, and it's I mean, just on the ground, it's sort of a strange place to be, because Gorton and Denton is not really a real place. No one wants to say that. It's a sort of weird constituency drawing as opposed to an actual area of Manchester, right? And so it's got two very distinct sides. It's got a sort of white working class side, which are very heavily Reform, and then a sort of Muslim area with a high sort of Pakistani population, which is the very Green Party side. And it was sort of strange seeing these two very contrasting areas in terms of demographics, in terms of sort of social elements, going at it almost. And it was a battle to see who would win. And in the end, of course, the Greens did. But they run different campaigns in different parts of the country, the Green Party. And so in Brighton, for example, where they've always had a seat in Brighton Pavilion, their campaign is very left-wing.
I think it's since 2010, but
since 20, So well, Caroline Lucas had it for a very long time. Their campaign they've run there has always been about things like gay rights. Now, is that going to be compatible with the campaigns they run in let's say, Bradford at the next election? Is that going to be compatible?
You're right. I mean, different political parties will focus on different areas and different things that matter to people in different areas. And you could say, you know, Boris Johnson's campaign, for example, in 2019, focused on some areas which matter to red wall seats and some things that matter to the shires and the more kind of middle class areas of southern England. And that, but I think that's a version of what's always happened. Maybe it says something about the way politics is today, that actually you can have a political party and the Green Party, which in my view talks outside of two sides of its mouth, because the two positions that you've outlined there are basically contradictory.
Yes. They are more far apart than any other party which has done what you said, and it is fairly common, but they are more far apart than any mainstream political party, as the Greens are becoming, has ever had.
But doesn't that say in itself the kind of end of left and right, the end of what people think, when people, for example, when people characterise Reform UK as a right-wing party, that just completely misses the point of Reform UK, especially when you have so many former Labour voters who are there. I mean, they're a populist party. I'm not saying that in a pejorative way or a bad way. I'm simply saying that they have some left-wing economics, some right-wing views on things like immigration, for example. They put it all together, they present a package, and there it is. And you look at the two parties in the polls anyway that are leading and will probably do best in the local elections coming up, if the polls are to be believed, Reform UK and the Green Party. And they're just smashing what politics is meant to be, has been in this country.
For a very long time. And I know in some ways the Green Party has a very sort of populist message as well. I mean, I think what both parties there are appealing to is maybe the fact that a lot of people feel like politics is broken on both sides. People think
they're looking for an alternative.
People had 14 years of the Conservative Party, got to the end of that and believed that was broken, and they've had nearly 2 years of Labour and they now believe that's broken, or in fact Labour has broken the country more in that time, and now they're looking for alternatives. I mean, I don't think you can't blame voters. You can't blame voters for wanting to look for alternatives, whether that's on the left and right, whether the left and right by 2029, if we keep going down this path, is even going to exist in the way that we sort of recognise today. I think you're right when you say that, especially with the Green Party, they have to appeal to everyone with such mixed messages. Can they grow more? Yes, I think they can. Is Zach Plansky a good communicator? In many ways, yes. I mean, I don't agree with a lot of the things he says.
No, he connects with people in a way that a lot of politicians don't.
And he connects with people in a way, and he hates this comparison, by the way. He hates this comparison, but he connects with people in a way that Nigel Farage does as well. And neither of them really want to recognise that.
No.
And I would love to see those two go head-to-head on TV, because I think it would be box office.
I totally agree with you. I'd love to chair it. Thomas, thank you. Thomas Godfrey there, news reporter at The Sun. Really interesting discussion there on a Friday evening. What do you make of what Thomas said? 0344 499 1000. Let me just read out a couple of messages. Kim says, how about starting oil development again in the North Sea? Then we wouldn't have to buy oil from foreign powers. Phil in Portsmouth says, this discussion of Gen Z men wanting their women to obey, sounds like a lot of them want to be either Muslim or live in Iran, where women are treated that way. Or is it just me, says Phil. Betty says, Peter, don't forget Rachel Reeves is making a fortune with extra taxes on duty and VAT on fuel, and will claim it's part of her economic miracle. Also can make diesel and non-war stocks that will be 10p cheaper, since the UK can't field an army anymore either way, says Betty. Just on Rachel Reeves, Pete the Mole has been in touch with a voice note. This is what he has to say.
Peter, I can see it now. Rachel Reeves' new scheme for help for poorer people to keep down the cost of energy. Well, I'll bet you right it goes to the same ones that vote for them. It won't be going to British people, will it? They'll avoid paying us like the plague. Absolutely disgraceful woman. I mean, she's even optimistic that she's going to be in that job in June as well, isn't she? That's really optimistic. What's going to be going on with Labour at the local elections? They're going to lose big time. And hopefully that old Feathers the Penguin, Keir Starmer, will be gone too. Yeah, I know we're going to get some ultra nutcase like a elastic band coming in, but that's just a chance we've got to take now, because it can't be any worse than this bloke. People say it will be worse, but I can't see it. This man Starmer hates Britain, hates everything we stand for. He has to resign, especially after the Mandelson scandal.
Pete, thanks for your thoughts on that. Keir Starmer is Feathers McGraw from Wallace and Gromit. I hadn't heard that comparison before. I wonder if he's more like Gromit going along on the train in the wrong trousers, putting out the track as the train goes very, very quickly upon it. But listen, thank you for that. Thanks to Joanna in Salisbury as well. He says, as my father used to say, I am the head of the house and what my wife says shall be done. Adrian in Dublin says, good evening, great show. I'm pretty sure my wife would obey me if only she would listen to me, says Adrian in Dublin. Now then, then maybe it is time to lighten the load and put a smile on our face, because we're giving you the chance to win 2 hospitality tickets to the British Grand Prix on Sunday the 5th of July with a full racing green trackside experience. This is the ultimate setup for race day. You'll get exclusive grandstand seats at the Loop and Village Corners, plus inner track access to watch the drivers arriving at the paddock, and access to the hospitality shuttle bus for easy on-site transport, racing simulators and live music between sessions, all-day street food and an open bar. Listen up to find out how you could be in with a chance to win.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 20th of March 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
So this was sent to me by a viewer earlier today, and one thing I would always encourage people to do, I'm on Twitter, I'm reasonably active on Twitter. If you see something that you think we should be covering, get in touch. This was a fascinating one. This is a tweet by a woman called Rebecca Ryder. NHS hospital, I noticed the clock on the wall showed the wrong time. A nurse told me they knew, but they wouldn't report it because replacing the battery through the NHS would cost £70. A £2 battery, £70? How and why? That's when I began to dig. It's no secret private companies sell things to the NHS, but the scale of the money being made from the most basic items is unbelievable, says Rebecca Ryder. Not just the NHS either, but almost every public service, police, civil service, social services. Workers in the NHS kept telling me the same thing. Basic items cost far more than they should. Sure, some medical stuff is important, but it doesn't cost £70 for a battery, £45 for a no-brand computer mouse, office supplies 4 times the normal price. That's not about being medical grade, it's about being overpriced. Also, things like the military, HDMI cables, really basic cable for a computer. The exact same one Curry sell for £10 gets sold to the military for £1,000. £1,000 for a cable in a country where people are choosing between heating and eating. What an insult, what a disgrace, says Rebecca. So there's lots in this, and I wanted to talk about it with Roy Lilly. We'll talk to him in just a second. Is Roy ready just at this moment? Not just yet, but we'll come to him. But Becca has been in touch and says, having worked in the NHS, the wastage is obscene. £6 for a pack of pens, £9 for a light bulb, and then £9 for someone for facilities to replace the old ones. Standard computer chairs, £190, all because they have to use certain suppliers. This was in 2014. It is a money pit, says Becca. We'll come to Roy in just a second because I think this is something really worth talking about. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it as well. 0344 499 1000. As I say, we'll speak to Roy, but I want to speak to Stuart first because he has been in touch from St Helens. Stuart, I believe you're a new caller. Tell us what is on your mind this evening.
Hello, Peter.
Hello there.
How you doing? I'm worried about all these Muslims that's coming over. And this Hannah woman for this Green Party.
Hannah Spencer, the new MP.
Yes, how she's all for them. Has she not seen all the videos on TikTok where there's gangs of Muslims going around beating people up?
Yeah, I mean, look, I find it really weird, and we were talking there a minute ago how, I mean, there are law-abiding Muslims and there are Islamists who don't abide by the law, of course, and we know that she has been supported by many, many Muslims in her constituency. Do you think she's being fair to other religions as well?
I don't know. I think the Christians are being eradicated, and it's quite frightening, to be honest with you. Until there's a lot of two-tier policing going on as well towards these people.
And this march or static protest, I suppose, that's happening on Sunday, presumably would concern you as well, but in support of the Iranian regime?
Peter, I'm absolutely petrified of the future. I'm absolutely petrified. I just thank the Lord I've no children.
Goodness me.
To be brought up in this country these days. And this Starmer is an absolute joke.
Stuart, I think so many people feel the same way, and thank you for your call this evening. I appreciate that. Roy Lilly is now with us, the former NHS Trust chairman. And Roy, I've been outlining these very, very expensive things that happen in the NHS and in the military as well, actually. Lots of different public institutions. For example, replacing a battery through the NHS costing £70. Why on earth is that the case, and how can it be combated, especially as the NHS always says more money, but actually if you're going to spend £70 replacing a battery in a clock, well, the money's going to be eaten up very, very quickly, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. It would be if it was true. It's an internal recharge thing. I mean, the NHS buys more batteries than probably anybody in the country. It buys bandages, potatoes and bog rolls, by the million. It buys stuff cheaper than anybody. But what you've got here is you only hear one part of the story. You hear it's an internal recharging mechanism. So, for example, if you're going to have a battery changed in a clock, you can't have a nurse balancing on a chair to change the battery in the clock, for all the obvious reasons these days, with health and safety and all the rest of it. And so somebody has to come from the estates department to do it. So you put in a requisition and say, our battery needs a new clock. It goes to the estates department. The estates department log it. Somebody gets sent with a ladder and a screwdriver and a battery, and the bloke's time is probably £40 an hour. And so however long it takes as part of the hour to change the clock, and then that's the internal recharge. And you mentioned the military. It's exactly the same in the military. It's the same in the airlines. It's a way of recharging internally so that you know actually how much a thing for accounting purposes actually costs.
So is it actually a wise thing to do?
Yes, it's a proper accounting thing to do, so that when an MP says, well, how much does it cost to run this hospital, how much does it cost to run a ward, well, a ward costs probably £2 million a year to run, with all the stuff that it does for people and the pharmaceuticals and all the bits and pieces that they've got. And it's just an accounting phenomenon. I mean, if you just take it out of context, it looks horrendous. And at one point in my illustrious career, I was the chairman of the National Standing Committee on Supplies and Purchasing. And in my day,
You show off, Roy.
No,
make us all jealous.
It doesn't get any better than that, does it? You think you get...
The only way is down.
You think you get top people on your programme. You haven't lived yet till you've
That's it. What you don't know about electrical sockets and how much they cost is not worth knowing. I bear
all the scars for internal charging, but I promise you nobody's coughing up 70 quid for a battery.
Okay. Roy, thanks for illustrating that point. Really interesting to talk to you as always. Roy Lilly there, who's a former NHS Trust chairman. Thank you to Dave. He says, for comparison, what percentage of Gen Z and other men or women believe that a man should risk or give up his life to protect his wife, says Dave in Kingston. Also, Dan and Kent says, I think Hannah Spencer is more environmental than multicultural, not about multiculturalism. I don't really care for left-wing politics, Cardi P, but it's always wise to know the opposition. Exactly why I read The Guardian, Dan, at least once a week. And she could be the one after the next election to guide the Green Party more towards entrepreneurism rather than social impoverishment, says Dan. Well, thank you for that. Let's hear a voice note from Elisa.
Peter, when we eventually do have a general election, and I hope it's not too far away, it would be great to see you as a chair on some of the debates or running some of the hustings. Put the feelers out. Hopefully we'll see you there.
Elisa, you're a woman of great taste and judgment, so thank you very much indeed for that. It's a lovely, lovely thing to hear on Friday evening, any evening. Thank you very much for that. We're going to talk in a second more about Iran. We'll take more of your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes too, because there's so much more to talk about between now and 9 o'clock. And then what just happened with Kevin O'Sullivan between 9 and 10. And of course, I'm back every night next week. We've got the debate desk now, got it up and running. And interestingly, as you may know from last night, I'm going to be having a discussion with Creative, whoever they are, on another floor of this building. I've never met them before, but I'm having a discussion with them next week about all the bells and whistles and all the little trios and the name of the programme and all the rest of it. And all the name suggestions have come in. Some have been roundly rejected, but some of them have been really excellent. So we'll have a think about what the show should be called. And if you have any suggestions on that, do text them in 87222 with the word talk in your text, or you can send me a WhatsApp 0344 499 1000. So much more to discuss in the next 29 minutes. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including this texter who says the private finance initiative, the UK procurement method where private firms design, build, finance and operate public infrastructure like schools, hospitals and roads under long-term contracts, is to blame for those hospital costs, in the texter's opinion. While it enabled rapid central capital investment, it was criticised for high interest costs, long-term debt burdens and poor maintenance. I blame Labour for this. Well, it certainly was brought in under Tony Blair back in the day. Thank you to Amy Fairbrother, who says, I agree with you. I'm not concerned what Hannah Spencer, the Green MP, wears. I'm more concerned about her policies and who the Greens support. Also, could it be that a lot of Labour councillors are defecting to the Greens because they see them as the true party of the left? Very interesting point there. And one person says, I do care what Hannah Spencer looks like. What she is wearing is totally unsuitable for the office of MP and frankly an insult. Looking and being professional, if you want to be taken seriously, is most people's red line. Talking nonsense and dressing like a clown doesn't cut it, says Jack. And final text for the meantime from, well, it's a tweet actually from Ray Mitchell, who says, Peter, I make all the major decisions in our house, such as whether we should bomb Iran, and my wife makes all the minor decisions like how much I can spend in the pub. Well, talking about bombing Iran, it is day 14. There is so much that has happened. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, has been talking about Iran's new supreme leader. Let's hear what he has been saying.
We know the new so-called not-so-supreme leader is wounded and likely disfigured. He put out a statement yesterday, a weak one, actually, but there was no voice and there was no video. It was a written statement. He called for unity. Apparently killing tens of thousands of protesters is his kind of unity. Iran has plenty of cameras and plenty of voice recorders. Why a written statement? I think you know why. His father, dead. He's scared, he's injured, he's on the run, and he lacks legitimacy. It's a mess for them.
You win, you know, you can only do, and we've won. Let me say, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
Donald Trump there as well, speaking in Kentucky a couple of days ago, where he said we have won the war. Well, Sean Bell is a former fighter pilot and now military analyst. Given that it's day 14, Trump admits Putin might be helping Iran. All 6 crew members of the US plane which crashed in Iran have been confirmed dead. We've heard about the Iranian leader wounded and disfigured as well. There is so much happening. It doesn't feel to me as if the war has ended. It feels to me as if it's in full flow. Sean, what's your analysis of what has happened?
Yeah, good evening, Peter.
Good evening.
I mean, I do think this is good. The history books will be written about this, that Americans' military might, yes, it's completely devastated Iran's military capability, but Iran is still there. It's still got its leadership in place. It's still got probably over 70,000 of those Shahed drones. It's still got its proxies active, and it's still got its foot on the throat of the West in the Straits of Hormuz. So quite frankly, it's very difficult to see this is going to end anytime soon, and time is just not on President Trump's side.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually you mentioned that, and given how much is happening very, very rapidly in all of this, I mean, with the Straits of Hormuz and that really absolutely crucial oil shipping route, there are reports that there might be mines in there as well, and even if it opened tomorrow, it would still take a long time to get things back up and running in that crucial shipping route, wouldn't it?
No, you're absolutely right, Peter. But whilst we talk about oil, I have to say the seismic thing that happened over the last 24 hours is President Trump lifting sanctions on Russian oil. Now, I think whilst that in itself is key, what you have to look at is the West is trying to help Ukraine in its fight against Russia, either militarily or economically. Economic sanctions have been biting. It's hurting Russia, hurting Russia's ability to fund the war. All of a sudden now, in one swipe, President Trump has given a huge dollop of money to President Putin. He hasn't referred or related or discussed this with European leaders. They will be absolutely furious. And this simply puts a bigger wedge between America and the rest of Europe. And it's clear that President Trump's interested in one thing only, and that's him. It's not about European unity or NATO.
Although isn't that inevitable, given that he did this essentially unilaterally the first time, and of course from the start, obviously with Israel, but the fact that there were so many European leaders, in his view anyway, that were found wanting, wasn't that wedge always likely to get bigger?
No, I agree with you, and I think having served a lifetime in the military, when we went on these sorts of enterprises, you would sit down with the politicians and make sure they were really crystal clear, not only about wanting to start a war, but how it would end. What was the end state? What is the political end state? I mean, the military is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. What has not been clear throughout this, what Trump's end state is. He talked a lot about regime change. Well, the regime has been wiped out. Version 2.0 is in place, but Mustafa looks even more violent, bent on revenge.
What do you think's going on? What do you think's going on with him? Because we hear all these contradictory reports. We haven't seen him. He may well have been injured, perhaps even fatally. There's a lot that we don't know here, and I wonder how stable you feel Iran is at the moment, especially when they're putting out these sort of death to America statements.
Yeah, but in a way, Peter, that's a bit of a sideshow, isn't it? Because whether he's alive or not, the fact is that the Iranian leadership is still in place. They're still in control. There's lots of people on the ground, and they may not have a military, not a gun left, but they're still actually being able to fire missiles. They're still causing havoc, and they can still control the Straits of Hormuz. President Trump wanted to go in, act, and then get out again. Midterms, everything else going on. All of a sudden now, I mean, if I was military and I was Iranian, I'd have playbooked this time and time again and know full well you can't win, but you just not got to lose. And the reason President Trump is criticising all his predecessors as being weak for not getting involved, they're not being weak. They were being careful. They were being smart, because their military advice would have been, don't go down this route. It can end badly.
How does it end? Where does it go now, do you think?
Well, I think it's very difficult to find a military solution to this, because, you know, the military aim was to get rid of the leadership. Well, you got rid of one, but the Hydra will grow back. Second one was to stop Iran ever delivering nuclear weapons. Well, they'll always be able to develop those in the future. It's about intent. You can't destroy intent. That's a political end state. And the naivety here is believing you can bomb Iran into a position where it will suddenly become subservient. So it's got to be a political solution. I suspect what's going to happen is Trump is going to declare victory and walk away and let the dust settle and hope that actually everything returns to normal. I think Iran will feel emboldened as a result of what's happening at the moment.
Very interesting. Listen, thank you, Sean. Sean Bell there, former fighter pilot, now military analyst. What do you think of what he said there? Give me a shout, 0344 499 1000. One texter says, years ago I worked in a council-run building. I took 2 weeks to change a light bulb. First the requisition, then 2 men, one to change it and one to hold the ladder when you only needed a step. You couldn't invent it. Ali says, wow, can I get a job to change clock batteries for 40 quid? In the NHS, I know what, I'll do it for 30 and see if the NHS loads. Well, a very good point there. Lots more to come. We'll go to the phones right up to 9 o'clock here on Talk, so stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Brian and Hayes says, your military expert's hyperbole is laughable. How can the Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran be standing on the throats of the West when Khomeini has no legs? It's a fair point. Rob in Surrey says, we're told the UK and America share intelligence information, but apart from that, I fail to see what is so special about the special relationship that's supposed to exist between our two nations. To me, it seems to be a very one-sided relationship. A particular example that comes to mind, where was America when Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands? There was no support from Ronald Reagan. Starmer is undoubtedly the worst Prime Minister during my lifetime, but not using British forces to attack Iran was, in my opinion, a good call, says Rob in Surrey. Let's go to the phones. Dena is in London and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Thank you for the call. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. It's lovely to speak to you again.
Oh,
after a few years.
I know you.
Yes, I used to work with you at MHC.
Yeah, in the civil service. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yes, you have an Iranian background, don't you?
Yes, I do. I'm dual British-Iranian.
Okay, yes. Cool. You've been well?
Not at all. No, I haven't been feeling well since the 28th of December, since the protests have been going on. I don't think any of us have been feeling very well.
Have you family still in Iran, Dena?
My entire family there. We can't speak to any of them because the government has cut off the internet. Occasionally, if the internet is reconnected, then we might have someone contact us or call us. But given the fact that we have had the government over there have issued threats against those of us that speak out against them. They threatened us with property seizures in Tehran or with being dealt with abroad. And I thought, upon hearing that, I actually want to become more vocal. It made me very angry. So, yeah, I thought I would, amplify the voices of family.
Good for you. And thanks so much for the call. What do you know about your family and how they are? What little bits of scraps of information have you been able to get?
I think people on the whole are really happy that the intervention is happening. I think they see it as a rescue operation. I think that they don't see it in the way that the left do or the liberal media is showing it, in terms of it being, they all talk about it being civilians. I think it's really horrific that the mainstream media is basically saying that they're civilians. They're not civilians. These are members of the IRGC, the majority of them. The civilian deaths, of course, really, really upsetting and tragic, but I don't think people understand that these are the people that were murdering and shooting and killing women and children and men, and taking them into hospitals and shooting them in the head and imprisoning healthcare workers and lawyers. And even, myself talking about this is, given the threats that they issue against us, like, it's not completely safe, and people and family can be targeted. And then to see my very own government in bed with our murderers at the British embassy, at the Iranian embassy in London, the UK Foreign Office, I absolutely appalled and disgusted, Peter. Genuinely, really upset. I couldn't be more offended. I'm really, really, really appalled.
We've talked about that in the last couple of nights on this programme, and I do think that when you have that horrendous information about those thousands of people, tens of thousands of people who've been murdered by the Iranian regime, I just wonder if the Foreign Office gets it. But I also wonder, Dena, whether there are lots of people in this country who don't seem to get it, who don't seem to understand what your family is going through right now. And when you see that this static protest, for example, the Al-Quds protest that's happening on Sunday, and there will be people joining that who aren't, who know very little about Iran, who will march in favour or attend that in favour, essentially, of the Iranian regime. What is your message to them, Dena?
I will say that this isn't a march that cares for Palestinian rights. I know the type of people that attend those marches They are just there to spread their very, very, very Islamist, very, very, very anti-Semitic message. The Constitution of Iran talks about the destruction of Israel. Their Mahdi doctrine post-2009 radicalizes the IRGC because prior to 2009 they were a lot more liberal, the security forces, and reformist. The Al-Quds March are organised by people who have links to the regime, and I say this, and actually I feel not scared, but I also, it's one of the reasons why I've never wanted to say anything before, because I know that, you know, they have their own spies here to attack and target us. But you know, you are marching us next to people who allow for and advocate child marriage in Iran, who abuse women, who Peter, a few years ago I went and I got caught up in the Masa Amini movement, not because I knew that there was a protest there, but I went to buy clothing and I got tear gassed. These people are not, they don't care about Palestinians, they don't care about human rights, they don't care about peace, they don't care about, they are terrorist thugs, all in all, and they've murdered so many people. My friend has her cousins completely shot in the eye and blinded. Yeah. As I say this, I am fearful for even any, because they just roam around freely here, and they've had, and they've stabbed a British Iranian journalist a few years ago.
That's right, about a year ago. So when you see the fact that the IRGC isn't a prescribed organisation in this country, that you see as you say, those Iranian embassy celebrations that Foreign Office diplomats and civil servants have taken part in, when you hear what Keir Starmer says, what do you think, and what's your message to him?
Peter, I used to think that maybe they genuinely think that by being nice to them, that they think that they are going to advance diplomacy. I actually think that maybe they support them. I think that maybe there's something in, I think maybe they feel like the alternative, if it is monarchy, is kind of against their left-wing values. And I think that they're probably, the idea of constitutional monarchy, even if we have it, goes so against their voter base. I don't know. I honestly don't know, because they're so willing. They're willing to sacrifice the lives of Iranian women and normalize our murders and our deaths for their own political ideology. And my message to Keir Starmer would be, Keir Starmer, you have 117,000 British Iranians in the United Kingdom. You know that these people pose a terror threat to us. You know that the Iranian government have issued out threats to murder us if we speak out against them. Why aren't you prescribing the IRGC? Why are you allowing them to roam around freely while they could attack and hurt us? It's really disgraceful now when they've publicly sent out a text message to everyone in Iran and they've broadcast it on their state TV. They're threatening 117,000 of us unless we're completely on their side. I mean, this is disgusting. Our Prime Minister has a duty to protect our national security and the entire national security of Britain, given how they pose a threat to all of us. But this is just not right. I'm absolutely horrified. They didn't also need to go to that embassy gathering, but I guess they support them. I don't know. That's the only thing that I can come up with, Peter. But I'm absolutely disgusted and horrified at all of this.
There are a lot of people as well who seem to either support Islamism or the Iranian regime in some way. We're seeing politics change an awful lot, actually, from when we worked together. A very, very different political outlook. You see the rise of the Green Party, you see your party and other aspects too of political discourse in this country, Dena. I just wonder whether you feel that Keir Starmer is perhaps looking over his shoulder at this rise in Islamism or support for Islamism, how that makes you feel as a British citizen here.
I think that the left, and I think a lot of people try to be a bit too polite. It's really difficult to have these conversations. I think he's scared of offending Muslims. I'm a Muslim, Peter. I'm a very moderate Muslim. I can't practice, my religion freely when I go to, in the past when I've gone to a mosque and I've seen, and it's obvious that they're run by the IRGC here. So actually, when we have these conversations and open conversations about what is Islamism and what is being a Muslim, it's not. I think there's this fear of being racist or all going against diversity. You know, these are the things that absolutely plummeted and eroded Iran's political culture in the late 1970s, and we need to get to this point of understanding that actually, trying to dismantle Islamism within our country is a really important thing for Muslims and for the Jewish people and for diversity in this country. But they won't take the time to sit down and do that because they're too scared of being called out. They need to be courageous, because it's not easy to be a moderate Muslim in this country anymore. You know, it really makes me feel ashamed that these Islamists are somehow representative of my nationality, of my culture, of my religion. He needs to sit down with people and he needs to communicate that and not bury his head in the sand. I think we need to be very, very, very open and honest about it and not be scared about being called racist, because it isn't. Because then that way we can control and figure out how to resolve community tensions.
How do we follow your lead and have an honest conversation and a reasonable conversation about it? What if you were in the room and you were saying to lots of people who want to be helpful, who want to talk about community cohesion, talk about diversity, what do they need to actually tackle head on?
I think they need to just talk to people who, I'm not saying necessarily like myself, but people who are within the community who absolutely understand that these people, the IRGC, are complete, Hezbollah, a complete terrorist. Even if you think about the United Arab Emirates, they don't give their students grants anymore to come to this country because they're afraid of their students being radicalized.
That's absolutely right. I remember covering that story. Yeah, absolutely. So
I think that I think that the British government should go and speak to other Muslim countries about how to de-radicalize, and they should take a note on that and try to be courageous and speak to people within the community and actually be very kind of methodical and courageous about thinking, okay, well, this is Islam, these are the majority of British Muslims, these are Islamists, they're exploiting our kind of lack of, they're exploiting the fact that the government isn't, taking a stand against it.
How tricky is it to speak out? How afraid do you think people are? People like you who want to make these points?
I mean, Peter, I've gone to Iran and travelled and back for the last 20 years, and also, in the UK, I'm also concerned about saying these things because I don't want to offend people. But when you see 30,000 people killed over 2 days, and you see all the videos and the communications that come out, and you can't speak to your family for 2 weeks, and you don't know if they're alive or dead. I've never, ever, ever experienced such trauma in my entire life. It is incredibly hard and incredibly difficult, but there's something that was so profound about that moment that I think a lot of us are just saying that it's, we can't legitimize the Iranian government anymore. We can't, it's enough is enough, really. It's time to put a stop to this madness.
Dena, I just want to read you a couple of the messages that are coming in.
Okay.
Sarah says, powerful stuff from this lady, well said. Debs says, Dena is amazing and so informative. We need to take on board every single word she is saying. Thank you, Dena. Elle says, Dena, what a brilliant caller. My heart goes out to her, and I sincerely hope that Netanyahu and Trump finish the job to enable the true Iranians to rise up and overthrow their regime. Our government should hang their heads in shame for their appeasement of Islamists. Their cowardice is endangering us all, says Elle. So that's just a flavour of how people are reacting right now to what you've said. And I want to thank you for picking up the phone, Dena, and I want you to ring me anytime to discuss what is on your mind, especially as the days and weeks continue. Will you do that for me?
I will do. Peter, I've just been following you so closely lately. You're such an ally to us. I really appreciate it. It makes me so hopeful, and I'll continue to stay in contact with you.
Well, that's a lovely thing to say, and thank you for a brilliant, really informative and absolutely heartfelt call. It's great to reconnect with you, Dena. Dena is someone I worked with previously in the civil service. We haven't, I don't think, communicated or spoken for a few years.